The sea wind pushed at the lines of prisoners as they climbed the gangway in silence. Boots thudded on steel. A gull cried once and the sound fell behind them. They had been captured far from home, under a white sun, and now they were sailing toward a coast they had only known from maps and rumors. Guards gave simple orders in clear English. Stand here. Keep the line. A ship horn sounded and the convoy began to move. The men watched the shore shrink, watched the water darken, and felt the engine set a slow and patient rhythm under their feet. On deck, the rules were strict but predictable. A guard checked names. A medic checked temperatures and hands for infection. A cook ladled stew that smelled of onions and meat and set down thick slices of white bread. The prisoners ate in silence at first, then in little murmurs of disbelief. They had expected thin soup. They had expected rough treatment. Instead they saw ordinary procedures done with calm care. At night they lay in bunks and felt the hull tremble as the Atlantic rolled by. The ship lights were shaded, and the corridor bulbs made a soft tunnel of yellow. Someone whispered a prayer in German. Someone else described fields from home. The ocean answered with a low and endless note. Days blended. A chaplain visited the deck and spoke without anger. The guards kept to routine. A nurse set a dressing on a cut finger and said that it would heal well if kept clean. The prisoners stared at the kindness as if it were a trick. In the distance, a gray destroyer cut the waves, turning now and then like a shepherd dog. One morning, the horizon lifted, colored itself in green and stone, and became the coast of Great Britain. Docks appeared. Cranes swung with a smooth authority. The ship eased alongside a pier and the rope lines groaned as they took the weight. A whistle blew, and the gangway clanged into place. They stepped down in files. Air smelled of coal smoke and salt, of tar and wet rope. A rail yard hummed with orderly motion. It was not grand and it was not theatrical. It was competent. It was ready. A sergeant read instructions. A corporal pointed to a long shed and said in careful German that registration would be quick if everyone cooperated. The prisoners moved forward and saw tables with stacks of forms, typewriters, ink pads, and small cameras. The first man sat, gave his name, and faced the lens. The shutter clicked. A card slid into a wooden box marked with a number. He was told to follow the line to medical inspection and then to the reception camp. He nodded. The line moved. The system did not shout. The system simply worked. Inside the intake hall the light was soft and steady. A nurse checked eyes and ears. A doctor looked at an old wound and said it would be treated that afternoon. A translator explained the rules of the Geneva Convention in German that was slow and kind. There would be work assignments. There would be letters allowed. There would be no punishment without cause. A table held small packets of soap and a comb for each man. Another table held tin cups that clinked like bells when stacked. The prisoners glanced at one another and at the guards, searching for the trap, and found only order. From the docks they were marched to a waiting train. Not boxcars, but carriages with benches, windows, and clean floors. Steam drifted along the platform like breath in winter. The engine gave a gentle cough and a cloud of white rolled past the windows. As the train pulled away, the men leaned to see rows of brick houses with tiny gardens. Children waved from a fence. A woman in a scarf paused with a basket in her hands and then lifted her arm in a quick greeting, unsure, polite, and real. In the carriage, a soldier poured hot tea from a metal urn and added milk and sugar without being asked. The flavor shocked them with its warmth. Fields opened and closed. Hedges drew lines across the land like writing. Church towers and mill chimneys flickered past, and then a wide river with barges and a tug that pushed and never seemed to tire. The carriage smelled faintly of soap and coal and steam. The rhythm of the wheels was calm, like a promise that nothing wild would happen today. They reached a camp ringed by wire and wooden watchtowers. A sign at the gate named the place and the unit in charge. Inside, barracks stood in neat rows. A storehouse. A cookhouse. A medical hut with a red cross painted in a clean circle. The commandant welcomed them with a short speech. Work would come soon, he said. Farms needed hands. Roads needed mending. There would be pay in camp currency. There would be letters home after censors read them. No one cheered and no one groaned. The words fell into a silence that was not quite fear and not quite relief. A guard led them to their bunks. Mattresses were thin but even. Blankets were folded square. A stove sat in the center and gave a small, steady heat. In the mess, the stew was thick. The bread was fresh. The tea was hot again. That night, as lights clicked off one by one, a man whispered that he did not understand this country. Another said that perhaps understanding was not required. Perhaps honest work and a clean bed were enough for now. Outside, a patrol boot crunched on gravel and moved away. Inside, the bunkhouse breathed in unison. Far beyond the wire, a village slept and would wake to a day of ordinary life. The prisoners listened to the quiet and felt the first thin thread of safety tug their thoughts toward a future they had not dared to imagine. Morning begins before sunrise. A bell rings across the frosted fields. Barrack doors open and a line of men steps into the chill. The routine is exact. Washington fold blankets. Sweep the floorboards. A quiet roll call in the yard, boots on gravel, breath steaming in the pale light. The commandant speaks through an interpreter. The rules are simple and firm. No weapons. No alcohol. No gambling. No leaving the compound without a pass. Respect the guards. Respect the schedule. Break a rule and you lose privileges. Keep the rules and you earn trust. Breakfast is plain but steady. Porridge in deep metal bowls. Bread still warm from the camp bakery. Tea poured into dented mugs. The mess line moves quickly. A notice board lists work parties, clinic hours, chapel times, and the day for letters. The letters are censored, yet they are lifelines. Men bend over thin paper and write slowly. They describe weather, work, and health. They do not write about troop movements. They do not write about escape. The censors stamp each envelope and pile them like small bricks of hope. After breakfast the camp breathes into order. Tools are counted out. The infirmary checks fevers and dressings. The barber sets a chair outside and shaves a queue of strangers who are learning to become neighbors. A guard walks the fence. He is alert, but not cruel. He nods to the librarian who unlocks a hut of dog-eared novels and grammar books. The football pitch is marked with lime dust. A volunteer coach sets out 2 battered balls. A violin phrase drifts from a barrack doorway, thin as morning mist, and then fades. At midday a siren signals the pause. Stew, potatoes, carrots, and the smell of onions. Men trade stories of farms in Saxony, of shipyards in Kiel, of mines in the Ruhr. A medical orderly stops by each table and asks about sleep and pain. After lunch there is inspection. Boots lined heel to heel. Tin cups stacked. Floors swept. The commandant walks through with a clipboard. He does not shout. He points. He explains. He expects order. He acknowledges effort. The day moves on like a well-kept clock. Afternoon brings rhythm and purpose. Work teams repair fences, plant cabbage, mend carts, stitch boots, and cut timber. The camp has a quiet economy. Tokens are earned for neat work and safe work. Tokens buy a bar of soap, a pencil, a shirt, a mouth organ. Safety is never a slogan. Hammers and saws are checked out and checked in. Kerosene lamps are trimmed. Fire buckets stand full by every door. A drill bell rings once a week and every man walks the route to the assembly field. The guards time the drill and sign the sheet. Education fills the late hours. English lessons in a hut that smells of chalk and tea. Men repeat simple phrases until they begin to fit in the mouth like bread. A volunteer draws a map of Britain on a board and names the counties slowly. Another man gives a talk on crop rotation. A chaplain speaks about peace and conscience. The library closes and the football teams return, shirts muddy and spirits high. The canteen opens for 1 hour. Laughter rises. Quarrels sometimes spark and then die under the steady look of a sergeant who trusts the room to choose calm. Evening is the softest hour. Supper is soup and bread and a slice of cheese. The infirmary lights glow behind frosted glass. A dentist chair creaks. A fever cools. A band of amateurs tunes a violin, an accordion, and a drum made from a tin. They play old songs that stretch a bridge to home. The floodlights blink on at the perimeter, not as a threat, but as a boundary that all understand. A guard carries a cat that has made the rounds of every hut and earned a dozen names. Lights out comes with a final bell. The barracks settle. A man counts the day in simple blessings. Warm food. Clean sheets. A fair word from a guard. A letter promised for Friday. The routine has edges of steel, yet within those edges something human grows. Order brings safety. Safety brings dignity. Dignity brings curiosity. Curiosity brings language and thought and plans. By the time sleep takes the camp, the men are no longer only prisoners of war. They are workers, students, teammates, neighbors in a fragile peace, learning that the road from captivity to community is walked one rule, one task, one kind act at a time. The trucks stop at the edge of a wide English field. The morning is cool and bright. German prisoners of war step down and feel damp grass under their boots. A British farm steward calls the roll with calm authority. There is no shouting. There is only the sound of crows and the distant knock of a tractor. The men line up in work teams. A farmer named Thomas greets them with careful English and clear gestures. He shows spades, sacks, and a cart. He points to the rows of potatoes that run like long brown rivers toward the hedgerows. Work begins. The soil is heavy with last night's rain. Hands find a steady rhythm. Lift, twist, drop. A cart creaks forward. Breath turns to steam in the cold light. Thomas moves down the line and corrects a grip. He shows how to lift without strain. He thanks a man who learns fast. The men look at one another. This is not the cruelty they feared. This is a day of work that makes sense. At noon a break arrives. The farm family brings tea in tin mugs and bread with cheese. The prisoners hold the food with quiet surprise. They taste warmth and simple kindness. Afternoon passes with faster tempo. The first cart fills. A boy no older than 16 backs the tractor with care. He smiles shyly and hands out fresh sacks. The team switch to beet rows and learn how to cut tops cleanly. The air fills with the pepper smell of leaves. Laughter appears like small sparks. Someone hums an old tune from home. Thomas listens and nods in time. In the late light, the field looks like a patchwork of order where chaos was in the morning. Back at the camp the men count their tokens for the day. They can buy soap, writing paper, and a little chocolate. In the barracks they compare calluses with pride. Letters are written to families. They describe the tractor, the tea, the quiet respect. They describe the feeling that labor can be honest and free from fear. Lights go out. The smell of earth stays on their hands. Sleep comes quickly. Tomorrow there will be another field, another cart, another set of rows that begin and end with choice and dignity. The next farm is an orchard near the coast. Dawn arrives with low mist and soft gull calls. The British foreman explains the plan. Pick only the ripe fruit. Leave the bruised fruit on the ground for feed. Work by column and move the ladders together. The men spread out like chess pieces across the grid of trees. Hands learn the gentle twist that saves the stem. Baskets fill. The foreman checks the first stack and offers a thumbs up. The rhythm becomes smooth again. The orchard warms. Bees drift through light that turns from silver to gold. By midday the men eat under the trees. The farmer's wife pours tea and passes apples that smell of sun. She asks simple questions in patient English. Where are you from? Do you have children? The answers are short but sincere. A bridge forms that is stronger than any fence. Afternoon brings a visit to the packing shed. The prisoners see belts that move the fruit, paper that wraps each apple, labels that mark the farm with pride. One man who worked in a factory before the war studies the motion of the gears and smiles. He sees order and purpose, not slogans and fear. Harvest weeks turn into a season. The men rotate through dairies, mills, and fields. They learn to mend fences and lay drains. They learn to set aside anger and to measure time by weather. In church halls they play football on Sundays. After the match there is tea and talk. The English speak of ration books with humor. The prisoners speak of hard winters with honesty. When frost comes, work moves to barns and sheds. The smell of hay and oil fills the air. Hands that once held rifles learn to plane a beam and true a door. By spring the change is clear. The men greet the farmers by name. They share jokes and new words. They write home with plans rather than despair. They imagine small farms rebuilt with clean wells and strong roofs. They imagine villages where neighbors shake hands and debts are paid in work, not in threats. When the trucks roll again, the men look back at the fields and the hedgerows. They understand that labor, fairness, and patience have done more than any speech. They have turned captivity into community, and work into a path that leads home. Morning fog lifts from the hedgerows, and the village bell calls people to Sunday service. The German prisoners stand by the gate with a guard and a local farmer. No one smiles yet. Curiosity moves quicker than fear. Old men straighten their hats. Children hide behind skirts and peek out. The prisoners remove their caps and listen from the path. The hymn rises, gentle and steady. When it ends, the vicar steps outside and greets the farmer first, then the guard, then the prisoners. His voice is calm. He thanks them for the harvest work and asks about their health. The men answer in careful English and nod with relief when he speaks a few words in German. The villagers take a second look. The wall shifts by a single stone. Work days grow longer. In the fields, rhythms begin to match. The farmer speaks slowly. He points, he shows, he waits. A prisoner repeats the action, then perfects it. A second prisoner teaches a third. By noon, they move like one team. The farmer pours tea from a dented flask and passes cups along the row. He adds milk and sugar as if he is serving neighbors. The men say thank you in English, and the word sounds right in their mouths. In the afternoon a tractor bogs down in the wet edge of a lane. The biggest prisoner wades into the mud with the farmer. They push together. The machine lurches free. The farmer laughs for the first time. He slaps the man on the shoulder. The guard looks at the clock and says nothing. Market day brings a new test. The prisoners arrive in a lorry with sacks of potatoes. They wear plain armbands and carry tokens for small purchases. The butcher watches with folded arms. The grocer lifts a brow. A woman behind a stall of apples weighs out an extra piece of fruit and slides it across the table. She says that hard work deserves a good lunch. The men bow and pay with tokens. No one is sure if that is allowed. No one objects. Music from a tinny radio drifts through the square. A pair of boys roll a cloth ball back and forth. One prisoner taps the ball with his boot. A boy kicks it back. Laces tear, laughter arrives, and a match begins without a word. For 20 minutes the game has only rules of play and shouts of goal. When the lorry pulls away, the butcher raises a hand in a short farewell. The grocer nods once. The fruit seller closes her till with a soft smile. The square exhales. Rain comes. Work slows. The farmer says they will fix fences and tools under shelter. In the barn the air smells of oil and wet hay. The prisoners find a broken gate hinge and set up a clean workbench. The youngest man draws a neat plan in charcoal on a scrapboard. He drills, files, and fits the pieces with care. The hinge swings like a clock hand. The farmer watches the craft and sees a son or a brother in the face of a former enemy. He says that a good hand is a good hand in any language. They share bread with cheese and a slice of pickled onion. The barn light glows warm. The guard leans on the door and hums the hymn from Sunday. Evening settles, and a small storm rattles the roof. The farmer's wife steps into the barn with a tray of mugs. The smell of strong tea carries a promise of rest. She speaks softly and points to a stove in the corner. Steam fills the air and coats cold fingers with comfort. One prisoner remembers his mother's kitchen. He does not say so, but he works faster. The wife notices a frayed sleeve and disappears. She returns with a sewing kit and mends the tear while the man holds still in quiet surprise. The stitch is practical and neat. She nods once and returns to the house. No speech is needed. The men stand a little taller. On the next Sunday the vicar invites the prisoners to stand inside the doorway out of the wind. The guard agrees. The first pews remain empty, but the music needs no permission to travel. After the hymn, a small girl offers a paper program to a prisoner. He whispers thank you. She beams with pride at the perfect exchange. After the service, the vicar organizes a friendly football match on the green. Villagers against farmhands and prisoners together. Positions shuffle, boots slip on grass, and laughter wins before the final whistle. The score does not matter. What matters is a field without lines of hatred. Letters begin to cross the channel more regularly. The censors stamp them, and the men clutch those thin envelopes like winter coal. A farmer's wife lends a dictionary so that one prisoner can write to his sister in careful English. He says that he is alive, that he is working, that people are fair. He tells her about the apple woman and the muddy tractor and the hymn that sounds like home even in another tongue. She writes back weeks later and asks for a description of the sea. He answers with the smell of salt and rope and rain. With spring, trust steps beyond the fields. A shopkeeper asks a prisoner to fix a sewing machine that has stalled for months. The man takes it apart on brown paper, lays out every gear, cleans each tooth, and brings it to life. The shopkeeper insists on payment and presses tokens into his palm. The man refuses. The shopkeeper presses harder. The man accepts and buys a loaf for the barracks. On the walk back he breaks the bread into equal shares. The guard takes none. The men eat and tell the story 3 times. One evening a storm knocks out power in the lane. The village gathers in the hall. Candles burn low. A local fiddler plays a slow tune, then a faster one. A prisoner claps the rhythm. Another joins with a soft harmony, not a full song, just a line to lift the melody. The room warms with sound. No one asks for an encore. It happens anyway. When the rain stops, the moon shows a road washed clean. The farmers shake hands with the prisoners as they part. The grip is firm. The eyes are level. The walk back to camp feels shorter than before. The first bridges hold. Tomorrow there will be work, and there will also be tea, and the gap between captive and neighbor will be smaller again by a single step. The first weeks on the farms were quiet. Then the cracks appeared. One cold morning a farmer accused a young prisoner of war named Carl of hiding a wrench in his coat. The men froze. A single tool felt like a threat. The British guard checked Carl's pockets and found only a broken pencil and a folded prayer card. The farmer swallowed his pride, then invited Carl to finish the shift. That evening the camp officer gathered both the workers and the guards. He read a simple rule. Every tool must be counted in the yard at the end of the day. Every man must be counted at the gate. No exceptions. The rule felt strict, yet it created calm. Men who feared insult now had a process that protected dignity on both sides. A week later, a different fire flared. 2 prisoners of war whispered to a shop girl during a delivery. Conversation was allowed if it was polite and brief. Flirtation was not. Word reached the village and the mood turned cold. The vicar asked the camp commandant for a meeting. They walked the lane with the farmers' union steward in the drizzle, and they wrote the second rule. No personal gifts. No private meetings. Greetings are welcome. Respect is required. The 2 men apologized in front of the work crew. The shop girl nodded and the street carried on. Conflict did not end. During a Sunday football match a British farmhand slid hard into a German goalkeeper. Shouts rose like crows. Hands curled into fists. An older woman stepped from the sideline, raised a whistle, and blew once. She ran the women's land army team and she knew how to command a field. She spoke first to the British side. Then to the German side. Play the ball, not the man. Shake hands, start over, keep the game clean. The match resumed. When the prisoners of war walked back to the camp they spoke about her all the way to the gate. Authority could be firm without rage. That idea surprised them more than the goal they later conceded. Soon the guards posted a new board inside the gate. It was plain wood with 4 lines. Count tools. Greet politely. No private gifts. Report grievances before sunset. The last line changed everything. Complaints could be spoken safely. Each evening a clerk in a wool vest sat with a ledger and asked the same questions. Who? What? When? What repair do you ask for? Not punishment. Repair. The word spread through the huts. When a fence board broke, it was fixed. When a rumor started, it was checked. When a man cursed in anger, he returned the next day with a proper apology. Not all fires could be cooled by rules. One dawn a trio cut the wire and ran toward the hedgerows. The alarm bell rang and boots hit mud. The patrol found them by a brook, shivering and exhausted. They did not resist. Back in camp the commandant faced them in the yard. He did not shout. He told the whole shift what would happen next. There would be no public humiliation. There would be work restrictions for a period of time. The men would lose recreation until harvest was secure. They would also sit with a village constable and a chaplain for 3 nights and listen. They would hear about ration cards, about sons at sea, about why the hedges were not a road home but a wall of grief for families who waited. The lesson bit deeper than a cell could have done. Another tension rose around pay. The prisoners of war earned vouchers. They wanted boots. The shopkeeper refused to sell leather to enemy labor. The camp clerk proposed a trade. Wool socks now. Boots after harvest, if the union agreed, and only from surplus stock. The union voted yes. The shopkeeper sold the socks and kept the boots until the grain was in. The prisoners of war worked harder than ever to earn what had been promised. When the boots finally crossed the counter, the shop bell sounded like a small victory for everyone. Ethics grew from habit. Guards learned to say please and thank you. Prisoners learned to return a lost pen without fanfare. Farmers learned to explain a task before they corrected a mistake. On Sundays the vicar invited any man who wished to listen to a short talk on duty and mercy. Some came for the tea. Some came for the warmth. Some came because the words were gentle and clear. Mercy is strongest when it is ordinary. By autumn the board at the gate held one more line. Honor work. Honor rest. A bell rings at dawn. A bell rings at dusk. Between the bells there will be fairness. Conflict still sparked. A gate stuck. A lad shouted. A man carried sorrow from a letter and snapped at a stranger. Yet the system held. Rules gave shape. Mediation gave voice. Small rituals made trust visible. The village did not forget the war and the camp did not forget captivity. But side by side, field by field, they learned how to live without hatred for one more day, and then for another, until the harvest was done. The bell of the village hall rings after sunset. The farm day is over, boots are muddy, hands are cold, but the room fills with men who take seats at long wooden tables. On the chalkboard the teacher writes simple English words. Good evening. My name is. I come from. The men repeat each line with careful voices. At first the sounds feel heavy, yet each word lands a little easier than the last. A kettle hisses. Someone pours tea. A farmer's daughter passes notebooks and stubby pencils. The hall smells of coal dust and soap. The teacher points to a map of Britain on the wall. He draws a line to the local town and another to the sea. He speaks slowly. He explains council elections, the idea of public debate, the role of the local newspaper. He does not shout. He does not threaten. He asks questions and waits for answers. The men are not used to this. They look at one another. Then one hand rises. Another follows. Voices begin to carry thoughts, not orders. The lesson moves from words to ideas. After class, the librarian unlocks a cabinet and lays out dictionaries, grammar guides, and thin paperbacks. A volunteer translates the first paragraphs. Some readers struggle. Others help. Laughter breaks out at a mispronounced phrase, not cruel laughter, but the kind that loosens fear. Outside the windows, a bicycle clicks past. Inside the hall, a sentence is built, then another. A man who never liked books whispers the new words again and again as if they are a password to a better version of himself. Sundays bring more than rest. In a church hall a local vicar invites questions about faith and forgiveness. A schoolteacher offers a talk on the history of Parliament and the rights of citizens. A nurse explains public health and the idea that care is owed to every person. The men listen hard. They compare this with what they were taught. They recall posters that mocked democracy as weak and divided. Now they see a village that argues without fear and then shakes hands and goes home in peace. One evening a crate of old newspapers arrives. Headlines from different weeks sit side by side and disagree. Editorials criticize leaders without punishment. Letters to the editor complain about shortages, about prices, about policy. Yet no one is arrested for it. A guard shrugs and says this is normal. The men are silent. The idea lands slowly, like snow on a field, quiet yet heavy. Choice is possible. Dissent is allowed. Truth can be tested. These thoughts do not leave the mind once they enter. On the farms the lessons continue. A farmer explains why he keeps records of yields and costs. He shows how a cooperative works, how neighbors share a binder twine order, how the bank manager will listen if you bring clear numbers. The men learn the words for ledger and invoice and interest. The farmer tells them that a business that respects its workers earns loyalty and speed. The men look at one another, and something unlocks. Language grows in layers. First comes the phrase for a tool or a field. Then comes a sentence for safety and weather. Then comes a question that reaches beyond work. What do you believe? What do you vote for? Why do you trust these rules? Each reply opens a door. The village school opens its library 2 nights a week. A hand-painted sign reads Adult Education. The classes fill fast. One table studies mechanics. Another studies bookkeeping. A third reads pages on history and law. There is no test at the end. The aim is confidence. A local council member visits the camp and speaks without notes. He says that power must answer questions. He invites sharp ones. The men ask about rationing and strikes and taxes. He answers plainly, even when the answer is not pretty. The room holds its breath. No one storms in to stop the talk. No one is punished for the question. The men who entered the hall with folded arms leave with heads tilted in thought. Letters home change as the months pass. At first they beg for news, for food, for proof that the family is alive. Later they describe the strange steadiness of this island and its people. They describe the village nurse who tells them how to set a broken finger. They describe the farmer who pays for a new boot sole without argument because a good worker must be safe. They describe a grocer who trusts a ledger more than a uniform. These small acts bend the metal of old beliefs. In the camp there are evening circles where men read aloud from a book of simple English stories. A quiet man stands to speak about a line that stays with him. Another admits that he had never questioned a poster in his life. A third says he wants to open a workshop after the war. He asks how a small firm can win contracts. The teacher smiles and draws 3 words on the board. Skill. Trust. Records. The chalk taps. The room is a forge. Ideas are being hammered into tools. There are difficult moments. A radio from home carries news of ruins and hunger. Anger rises in the chest. The men fall silent and stare at the floor. The teacher does not argue. He lets the room breathe. Then he suggests one task. Write one plan for one thing you can build or repair when you return. A plow. A roof truss. A water pump. The mood shifts from despair to purpose. Pencils move across paper. Futures take shape. By spring the village invites the men to a small exhibition in the school gym. There are displays of repaired engines and neat logbooks. There is a table with vocabulary lists and little dialogues. A boy reads a short welcome. A guard stands by the door and does not interrupt. The headmistress shakes hands with each man and says well done and good luck. The applause is soft and real. Education has done what walls and wires cannot do. It has loosened fear. It has turned strangers into neighbors. It has placed new language in old mouths and new values in old hearts. When the order to repatriate finally comes, the men pack their few things, and they also carry something that no guard can count. They carry a way of seeing the world. They carry the belief that skill and fairness and open debate can rebuild a life. They step toward the pier with a different stride. They are still the same men, yet they are not the same. The war is ending, and the news arrives in fragments carried by letters, whispers, and the wireless in village kitchens. The German prisoners hear it first from farmers who pause at the hedge and say that the front has moved again. The fields do not stop. The men lift milk churns, mend fences, and gather eggs while their thoughts run ahead to a ruined homeland. At evening mess there is a hush that feels like a storm about to break. Some men study English phrases more intently. Others stare at their hands, remembering faces they have not seen for years. The camp loudspeaker reads official statements in measured tones. Words like surrender and ceasefire float above the barbed wire and settle in every chest. Work details continue, but they move with a tug of urgency. A tractor stalls and 3 prisoners fix it without a word, each one thinking of a different road home. Permission slips for chapel services and library time are signed faster than before. A teacher from the village visits and offers a short lesson on how local councils rebuild bridges and schools. The lesson is quiet and practical. The message is clear. There will be much to repair, both bricks and souls. At lights out the Baroque whispers turn to plans. A baker wants to return and reopen a small shop. A mechanic wants to bring British safety routines to a workshop back in Germany. A shy young man admits that he wishes to write letters to the farmer who treated him like a son. The next morning a sergeant gathers the men and explains the repatriation steps. Medical checks. Identity confirmation. Work record summaries. Short courses for carpentry, plow adjustment, and bookkeeping. The men listen with a steady concentration that would have been unthinkable when they first arrived. After duty a group plays football with village youths. Someone slips a simple thank you note into a pocket. The ball arcs high against a clean spring sky. The crowd claps. No one mentions ideology. Everyone understands that the match is about belonging, even if the belonging is temporary. As the convoys are planned, the camp opens new classrooms. There is a map of post-war Europe on the wall and a list of civic words on the blackboard. Ballot, council, permit, budget. The instructor shows how a town agrees on a water line and how citizens argue without fear. The lesson lands with force. Many prisoners have only known orders shouted from above. Now they copy the words carefully. They imagine village meetings in places where roofs are missing and streets are broken, and yet people will still gather to decide how to live. In the yard the quartermaster issues tool kits for those who will return to farming. Small wrenches. Oil cans. Seed charts. Each item says the same thing. Build. Repair. Begin. Farewells come in a rush. A farmer brings a basket with bread, cheese, and apples. A child brings a drawing of a tractor with two smiling figures. The camp chaplain speaks of forgiveness, which is not forgetting, and hope, which is not naivety. The final evening feels like the last page of a long book. There is a song, quiet and steady, about roads and mornings. At dawn the lorries arrive. The prisoners line up with bundles and letters. Handshakes are awkward and strong. Eyes are wet and unashamed. Some men ask permission to write back once they have an address. The guards nod. The gates open. Wheels turn on gravel. The journey home passes hedgerows and mills and stations where porters tip their caps. The landscape looks ordered and abundant, and the men carry that image with them like a lantern against the ruins they expect to find. On the ship they talk about small plans. A clean well. A bread oven. A room for a library. They promise to keep the habits they learned. Work safely. Speak honestly. Help the neighbor first. When the coastline fades the future is still uncertain, but the choice has been made. They will return as sons and brothers and also as students of a hard lesson. Community is not an accident. It is a craft. It is a harvest. And if they plant it with patience, it will grow again. The war ended, but the story of the prisoners did not. Many German prisoners who had worked on British farms returned home with new habits, new skills, and new ways of thinking. They had seen how a village could run on trust, how a harvest could be a shared effort, and how a handshake could be as binding as an order from a superior. Letters began to cross the sea. A farmer in Kent wrote to a former prisoner in Hanover about the spring planting. A mason from Bavaria sent thanks for a winter coat that a Welsh family had mailed. These letters carried more than greetings. They carried a model of life based on cooperation and dignity. Some men came back to ruined towns and empty workshops. They rebuilt using ideas learned in Britain. They formed cooperatives to pool seed and tools. They scheduled workdays the way British farmers had shown them, with simple charts and clear roles. A few started evening classes in sheds and church halls. They taught basic English, bookkeeping, and the operation of tractors. They repeated phrases they had heard in Britain. Plan the work. Share the burden. Pay on time. Trust the team. Not every return was smooth. Some neighbors distrusted the talk about fairness and shared decisions. Some called it weakness. The former prisoners argued that fairness made work faster and safer. They pointed to the yield of new wheat fields. They showed the savings from shared repair of machines. They stood by the new methods through a stubborn season and won respect when the harvest came in strong. Marriages and migrations followed. A handful of men married British women they had met at markets and chapels. Some families moved to Britain and opened small businesses near the very farms where they had once labored under guard. Others remained in Germany but kept up the friendships. Parcels went back and forth. Jams and knitted scarves went east in winter. Coffee and tinned meat went west when money was short. The exchange made a bridge that politics could not shake. Memory took root in public places. A parish planted an oak for the men who had helped bring in the crops of 1945 and 1946. A German town mounted a small plaque on the wall of its rebuilt school to thank the British charity that had sent books. Former prisoners spoke in classrooms. They did not hide the dark parts. They described hunger, fear, and the first hard days of captivity. They also described the first cup of hot tea in a farmhouse kitchen and the silent decision to treat strangers as workers and neighbors. Children listened and asked careful questions. The answers were steady and kind. Violence breaks quickly. Community heals slowly. Work done together heals fastest. In the early 1950s the exchanges deepened. Farm cooperatives on both sides traded advice on crop rotation and dairy sanitation. Mechanics swapped notes on tractor fuel and cold starts. Local councils compared methods for housing and road repair. The former prisoners stood as interpreters. They knew both languages and both tempers. They knew when to pause for tea and when to push for a decision. Projects that might have stalled began to move. A bridge was repaired before winter. A grain dryer was installed before the late harvest. A training program produced a class of millers who reduced waste and raised quality. The greatest change took place inside the men themselves. Many had marched into captivity with narrow pride. They now measured pride by service. They praised punctual pay. They praised clean accounts. They praised a rule that protected the weak without shaming the strong. A few entered local politics and pressed for fair land leases and transparent tenders. Others stayed on the land but kept the same spirit. When storms hit, they shared fuel and labor. When prices fell, they shared trucks to reach a larger market. They treated a rival as a future partner. They had learned that enemies can become neighbors if the work is honest and the rules are clear. Reunions began. A village hall in Yorkshire set out long tables and brought in a gramophone. Photographs of harvest crews lined the walls. Men in their 60s found the faces they had known as boys. They spoke slowly at first, then faster, as memories rose like a fresh wind. A pastor offered a short prayer for the dead and a longer thanks for the living. Someone passed around a ledger with the old wage marks and signatures. The room fell quiet. Then came laughter, and the rattle of teacups, and the soft thud of hands meeting across the years. The legacy was simple and strong. Work can change the heart. Courtesy can change a town. A steady wage and a fair contract can change a nation. The story of the prisoners in Britain proved that mercy is not weakness. It is a tool as real as a plow. It makes straight lines in rough ground. It turns strangers into partners. It turns fear into a plan. The men who once arrived under guard left with a purpose. Build. Share. Teach. Remember. Their children and grandchildren kept the letters and the photographs. They told the story at tables and in fields. They summed it up in one lesson. Freedom is not only the right to stand alone. Freedom is also the strength to stand together.